Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here representing Jason Blaha Strength and Fitness, and today I thought I would chat with you guys and gals a little bit about white rice. If you guys would please click like down below, it'd be greatly appreciated. If you're not subscribed or following, please do so, and if you'll be kind enough to drop me a comment down below, I would appreciate that so much. Let's get over to the topic. White rice, perfectly healthy food. No one has ever, until the whole keto movement, until the entire keto movement, no one ever thought white rice was an unhealthy food. It's been a staple in many, many countries, many cultures that don't have diabetes, obesity, cancer, heart disease, any of that to the rate that we do in the West. And they've never had these problems. It is a completely non-existent problem for the rest of the world, right? And I want people to think about that for a minute. Am I not saying that brown rice might not have some benefits? Sure, brown rice has some benefits, higher antioxidants, a little more fiber, a little bit of healthy fats. But realistically, generally speaking, white rice is very well tolerated. It is healthy for most people who consume it, and I want people to look at that for a minute. The whole concern, well, it's carbohydrate, it's starch, it's glucose, the glycemic index, all these things, but why do you have this metabolic dysfunction to begin with? And what people need to understand, those are topics of conversation for people who have metabolic issues already. The white rice didn't give you that. Okay, we need to be clear. White rice doesn't cause those issues. Anyone who has a problematic insulin response to white rice is already unhealthy, right? And we have to understand that. Again, we have to be clear on that. You are already metabolically unhealthy if this is occurring. All right? And I've said this before, people with the ketogenic diet, people will push, well, we want lower circulating insulin. But that doesn't come from eating lower insulinogenic foods. That comes from having better insulin resistance. In other words, we know, looking at tons of data, fit athletic people who lift weights and have muscle have lower circulating insulin eating white rice than ketogenic people do who are still obese and don't carry lots of muscle eating no carbs. Okay, so we need to be clear on that point. Let me state that again. Lean athletic people who work out and train and have muscle, even if they eat 50-60% of their calories in that day from white rice, especially if they're eating vegetables and stuff with it with fiber, will have a lower circulating insulin and a lower circulating glucose level than people on deep ketogenic diets who are eating nearly zero carbohydrate, particularly if they're eating the higher fat versions, the high saturated fat, okay? And this has been seen repeatedly, right? So again, you have to look at this and go, what are you talking about? This diet is not causing lower circulating insulin. White rice, while being very, very insulinogenic, for people who have a healthy metabolic response because they haven't destroyed their body, we handle it really well. And in fact, it's a very clean fuel source. The human body thrives on glucose. And so when someone says, well, not mine, if your body doesn't thrive on glucose, it's because you are in a lifestyle-induced disease state. People say, there's the exception, type 1 diabetics. Okay, fair. What percentage of people are they? That's far less than 1% of the people out there. It's a very, very tiny demographic, and we shouldn't be using them as the example for everyone else, okay? So if you don't process glucose well, it's because you are obese, you're fat, you're insulin resistant, right? You've mistreated your body with poor diet, low fiber, too much saturated fat, too much sugar, too much refined sugar. Now you don't always handle it well, but here's the other thing. We've seen plenty of medical doctors who have successfully treated those people and still put them on heavy starch-based diets. Again, can include tons of white rice, white potatoes, all this stuff, who they take their dietary fat really low, so they eat starches and vegetables, and they get these things back under control just fine. It just takes a bit of work. Okay, so we need to be clear in terms of these metabolic issues. And then you look at the rest of the world, everyone who's not pushing this low carb agenda, that is literally where this came from, by the way. Purely from the low carb diet end, and low carb zealots are who has pushed this idea entirely. Like again, this is where it comes from. Around the world, tons of people have white rice as a staple. And I've seen posts who are like, yeah, I mean, I came to the US now And we were all lean and fit, and we all ate white rice, and I had it 2 or 3 meals a day. And I get over here, and then everyone's horrified by it, and they're like, "Oh, how are you thin? How is your family thin?" And at a healthy body weight, eating all this white rice, or like it's a normal part of just our diet. So you go look, rice, lean protein, whether it's fish, chicken, pork, tofu, plus vegetables, is a staple in plenty of countries that have nearly zero obesity. And people say, well, they're not getting enough. Well, no, they have access to plenty of white rice. It's cheap and readily available. They could, in theory, overeat it, but people generally don't, right? Unless you're adding a ton of fat to it. But if you're not adding a bunch of fat to it, this is not a problem. Right? It's not a problem. All these people are healthy. So we need to be clear. When you step back and you look at epidemiology, white rice around the world isn't correlated at all with obesity or anything. In fact, it's inversely correlated. In fact, the U.S. and all the fattest countries with the most of these lifestyle and diet-induced diseases and highest obesity rate eat less white rice than these other places. Come on. It's not supported in the epidemiology. So then people say, well, what about individual anecdote? Well, how many elite athletes consume white rice? How many elite bodybuilders literally get shredded and down to ultra low body fats eating white rice? Plus, the insulin hypothesis is largely dead. Okay? When you even think about the calorie in, calorie out models, it's way more difficult to overeat even white rice than it is high fat foods, right? It's way more difficult. Has a better satiety. Plus, carbohydrates don't really store. Starchy carbs like that are not going to store as body fat to an appreciable degree. The whole concept of large amounts of de novo lipogenesis has been largely debunked in humans. If you eat too many of them and you eat a lot of fat with it, you'll store the fat you eat, but you're not storing the carbohydrates. So again, the issue with all these problems is all the fat that people are adding. And I'm not telling you to avoid healthy fats, by the way. I'm simply pointing out that in the grand scheme of things, that's where a larger chunk of the issue comes from. Our problems are not coming from rice or grains or any of that, right? These problems are coming from excessive saturated fat, excessive refined fats, excessive refined sugars, and other highly just hyperpalatable foods that have large amounts of refined grains, sugars, oils, butter, all this stuff mixed in. This is our problem. This is where the obesity comes from. Again, white rice tends to be eaten with vegetables. And then any concerns even for sometimes the absorption or the nutrients, but it's often a vehicle for vegetables. And when that happens, we're right back over to amazingly healthy. But it's a nice, clean fuel source of glucose, which is the human body's preferred fuel source. We burn it efficiently, we burn it effectively, we tolerate it really well if we're healthy. And white rice is perfectly fine, perfectly healthy fuel source for most human beings, especially if you're active and you haven't destroyed your metabolic health. But even then, it doesn't mean it's a problem. A lot of the foods that people are still promoting in place of it are still worse.